buckle up everyone, because Texas officials are going to get a verbal smackdown in this video. I'm referring to Livingston Dam. There was a lot of news at the end of June, early July, that there was some warning about a potential failure of Livingston Dam due to heavy rainfall and high discharges through the dam, but not a lot of other information was forthcoming. So I've done a couple of videos on this, and as a result of my research, there were still some key questions that I just simply couldn't get information on. So what I'm going to do in this video is compare essentially two major dam projects. Both had spillway problems, but in Texas, the information's being hidden and restricted, whereas in California, the key information's freely available for, in fact, a much bigger project. So as I mentioned, there weren't a lot of early details at the end of June about what was going on with Livingston Dam, except people knew it had something to do with the spillway. So then about 6 days later, some of the local media outlets, particularly Click 2 Houston, obtained additional information that repairs were going to be going on downstream of the spillway to reconstruct the stilling basin and one of the guide walls, which is the wall on the side of the spillway. But that was it. So I had reached out to Trinity River Authority, who is in charge administratively of this project, and I'll go over what I found out, but it's quite an interesting saga. Now, as a reminder, the red call out is where Livingston Dam is located. It's about 70 miles northeast of the city of Houston. It provides about 70% of Houston's drinking water. I think it provides higher percentage of the drinking water for some smaller communities in the area. Because this dam added hydropower 4 years ago, now keep in mind this project was built primarily for water supply with a little bit of a flood control benefit thrown in. So hydropower didn't come along till about 2022 with full operation. As a result of that, the Trinity River Authority had to obtain operating licenses from FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So as I was doing my research for these past videos, I came across what I thought was an interesting document, and that was a 2022 dam breach analysis that had been submitted to FERC. But the only thing online about this document was about the author and the company that produced it, which was a consulting firm, SGH, which is an abbreviation for Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager. That's the same consultant that was involved for the so-called repair of the Millennium Tower Foundation. So one of the key questions while I was doing my earlier research for the previous videos on Livingston Dam is, if it does fail, what areas are going to get flooded out? That's a pretty common question. In fact, it figures into the emergency action plan that every dam owner and operator must have by various statutes. And I couldn't find anything online about this inundation map or this particular inundation study, which was done fairly recently. So I submitted a public records request to Trinity River Authority. And about a week, 10 days later, I get a call from one of their attorneys wanting to know basically what I was up to. And I told them I have an engineering construction related YouTube channel, and I was doing follow-up stories on the Livingston Dam. And the lawyer indicated, well, this is critical infrastructure. FERC doesn't want us releasing this information. I said, look, I don't want to know about the vulnerabilities of various appurtenant structures or even the dam itself. Well, all I'm looking for is, if there was a dam breach, what the downstream flooding would look like. Just send me the inundation maps. So as we ended the call, she indicated that that was pretty doable, that she thought she'd be able to send me those inundation maps. Instead, another week after that, I get a letter that basically says, we're not going to give you anything. So let's look at this circled area. It says the requester's request pertains to documents prepared for submission to FERC, and which FERC deems confidential critical energy/electric infrastructure information, CEII. CEII is available directly from FERC, provided a requester executes a non-disclosure agreement. For purposes of the Act, the requested CEII is confidential by law and therefore not subject to release, and they give the citation. So no dice on this inundation study. But I look further down in this letter, they said there is some information we can provide you, which is the document attached as Exhibit B. And I'll show you that document here in a second. So they go on to say the remainder of the 2020 dam breach analysis is deemed CEII by FERC. By this letter, the authority requests a decision from the Attorney General as to whether all or portions of documents responsive to the request are within the following exceptions to disclosure under Texas Code. And there's a summary that they consider it confidential. That is the state of Texas. Because FERC considers it critical information, they're not going to release it. Now, they did provide some interesting background information about Livingston Dam, but it's not the information I asked for. This second paragraph, the spring of 2024 ranked third in terms of rainfall in the recorded history of Dallas. Fort Worth received the fourth most recorded rainfall during that same period. The entire Trinity River system was effectively full when between April 28th and May 7, this was 2024, a large area in East Texas recorded extraordinary rainfall amounts. During that period, total rainfall exceeded 25 inches in parts of Walker, Polk, San Jacinto, and Trinity counties. And I know folks in Texas call it San Jacinto. Those four counties surround Lake Livingston. With flows coming downstream and massive rainfall directly over Lake Livingston, the authority was required to release water rapidly from the lake. The dam has a gated spillway. A concrete superstructure houses 12 Tainer gates that can be opened to release water from the lake. If floodwaters were not released through the gates, water would eventually overtop the gates and potentially the earthen dam, which could result in a catastrophic failure. Such a failure would imperil both downstream lives and property and result in long-term shortage of water to meet human and industrial needs. Okay, so they're just saying why this dam's important as if there was any question about it. And then towards the bottom here, prior to spring 2024, the largest recorded release from the dam was 110,600 cubic feet per second, which occurred both in October 1994 and August 2017. Beginning on March 2, 2024, the authority was required to release water from the dam at a rate of 124,000 cubic feet per second for a period of approximately 41 hours. This was the first time since the dam gates were closed in 1969 that a release of 124,000 cubic feet per second from the dam was necessary to reduce the lake's level. So record discharge, and as we know, caused some spillway damage. And this part of the letter, they just talk about some of the damage, which I've already recapped. As I mentioned, they said they could release some information, which in Exhibit B turns out to be the letter of transmittal for this 2020 dam breach study. That was it. So the question is, why does FERC have jurisdiction over Livingston Dam and its operation? Well, because FERC has jurisdiction of any non-federal project that generates hydropower. They also have jurisdiction in a couple of these other areas. So how much hydropower can the reservoir at Livingston Dam generate? Well, it turns out it's 24 megawatts, which is a pretty puny amount. It basically, in terms of hydropower size classification, is just between small and large. So I guess they don't have a medium hydropower classification, but that's in essence what it is. Now, the hydropower generation at Livingston Dam is what they call run of river. So there are three main types of hydropower generation. You have impoundment, which is what Three Gorges Dam hydropower is. You have a reservoir, and its water's piped through to a turbine, which generates electrical power, and the water's discharged downstream. Now, run of river, which is a diversion type hydropower plant, a portion of the river flow is channeled through a canal or penstock and uses the natural decline of the riverbed elevation to produce energy. And then the final category is pump storage. And I've seen a few of these projects. You would think, well, how does it make sense to generate electricity if you've got to pump the water up the hill? Well, it's because of the arbitrage. So they can pump water up to the reservoir at night when electrical costs are at their lowest. And then during the day, release the water and generate power and sell it at a rate that was higher than it cost them to get the water up to the top of the reservoir. Those plants have a negative efficiency, by the way, as you would expect. So just some more details. The hydropower aspect of this Livingston Dam project was initiated in 2015, was dedicated in 2021. So let's put the 24 megawatt generating capacity at Livingston Dam up against the overall capacity through the state of Texas, and it's 145,000 megawatts. So a drop of a drop in a bucket. So essentially, for such a small amount of electrical power generation, local authorities in Texas is allowing FERC to classify this as critical infrastructure, and they're saying, hey, because of that, we're not going to release any important information about the dam or what would happen if the dam failed in terms of what areas would be flooded out downstream and how much flooding would occur. So I thought, maybe I'll go to the Corps of Engineers websites, because this dam operated from 1969 without FERC jurisdiction. Maybe there's some old flood inundation maps out there. So I'll put links in the description for some of these resources, but you follow the Corps link and it takes you to the National Inventory of Dams. So I look up Livingston Dam, and there's a layer that you can turn on that shows you the inundation map, except when you do it for Livingston, nothing pops up, just blank. I previously did a video about the risks associated with Cherry Creek Dam and Reservoir in metropolitan Denver, Colorado. I used to work on that project over 30 years ago, and using that National Inventory of Dams website, this is what the inundation map looks like. So you can actually pull it up. So I'm going to compare this situation with Livingston Dam to Oroville Dam in California. So as most of you already know, Oroville Dam had tremendous releases of water, which did damage to the principal and auxiliary spillways. As a result, there was an evacuation order for getting 180,000 people out of the downstream area from this dam. You can see some pictures of the damage. It's since been repaired. So as I mentioned, for Oroville Dam, FERC has jurisdiction over their operation. The dam was completed in 1968 as part of the water supply program for the state of California, the Central Valley Project, and hydropower was installed just right after original completion of the dam. So FERC has had a checkered history when it comes to Oroville Dam. Back in the early 2000s, there were professionals who were warning both the state and the federal government, in this case FERC, that they thought there were significant vulnerabilities with the spillway at Oroville Dam in the event of a large discharge. And FERC basically said, we're good. Everything's going to perform as designed. Well, in 2017, we know that's not the case. And then FERC got involved mandating all types of studies and repairs, which the state of California certainly would have done anyway. But I'll show you here, the inundation maps for Oroville Dam are available, even though FERC has jurisdiction over that project, just like they do over Livingston Dam. So let's look at California's resources for finding out information about their key dams in the state of California. So here's an image from the website where I just filtered out everything except the high hazard dam, and you can see there's many, many high hazard dams in California. So I did a search for Oroville Dam. Here's an aerial view of Oroville Dam. And I returned the flood inundation map in case there was a dam breach or catastrophic release of the reservoir from the dam. And it floods a massive area downstream. So it's not surprising that they ordered the evacuation of nearly 190,000 people in 2017. You can also download a PDF that shows this potential inundation in much more detail. You can see the circular area here, which is a butte that's high enough in elevation that the water flows around it. And I want to show you this table. It gives you detailed information about what the water height will be at various locations from the dam, as well as the time that that peak would occur. So at a distance of 4 miles, you've got an inundation depth of 185 feet with a velocity of 41 feet per second, which is crazy fast. If you've ever been around the Missouri River and you see it's a very fast flowing river, and it's a quite dangerous river for anybody to try and go swimming in. A lot of people drown when they end up in the Missouri River for one reason or another, but that typically flows at 12 feet per second. But let's just go on down here. At a distance of 108 miles from the dam, the inundation depth is still 12 feet, but the flow's very gentle at 1 foot per second. To get a flow that's less than, say, what the typical flow for the Missouri River, you have to go nearly 30 miles downstream. So that's rather sobering information. I think that information should be publicly available in every location where there's a dam. So I'm not sure what the whole history was with California in terms of their making this type of information available to the public. But as a result of the issue with the Oroville Dam spillway in 2017, the state of California passed a law requiring all state jurisdictional dams, except for low hazard dams, to develop inundation maps and emergency action plans. And I found this other references this 2017 law. After the maps are approved, the state makes all inundation maps available to the public. So again, Oroville Dam has a structural height of nearly 8 times that of Livingston Dam. The structural height of Livingston is about 100 feet. Oroville's 770 feet. I mean, it's a massive project and potentially impact far more people than a problem with Livingston Dam would or could. So in my opinion, Trinity River Authority has not been transparent at all about the nature of this dam and any problems. In fact, press releases were sent out in early July, more or less suggesting that the spillway had been fixed, which wasn't the case. In fact, they're still working on repairing the spillway even now, well over a month later. And this has been going on for a long time as well. Starting in early July, TRA got the FAA to impose a flight restriction and a drone exclusion for Livingston Dam. I mean, why? They don't want to have people see that they're actually working or not working to repair the dam, or they don't want people to see exactly what's being done, even though I'm sure the public can get fairly close to the project. They just can't do any documentation with a drone or aerial flight to disseminate that information publicly. So I don't know really why FERC has to be involved with some of these projects. In the past, when I did a lot of work with power plants, had occasion indirectly to interface with some administrators at FERC, and it wasn't very pleasant. In fact, I was talking with some structural engineers, and this was a power plant, a natural gas power plant, but it had a LNG terminal, so the gas was going to come over from Trinidad, as I recall. And FERC had some design requirements for the LNG storage tank, and they had a pretty creative scenario that they were worried about, and that was they were concerned that somebody in a boat could buzz by and shoot the LNG tank with an RPG. So I think maybe they're reading too many Tom Clancy novels. But I think it's interesting. That was back in the early mid-90s, and they were worried about extreme things like that, but yet they weren't worried about the spillway at Oroville 20 years ago. So I'll put a link to the request for public information from Trinity River Authority. I mean, it's going to be up to you folks in Texas to demand transparency if that's what you think is necessary to have a better understanding as to what areas could be flooded out downstream in the event of a breach of Livingston Dam. Check out the digital download links in the description. I've got the biggest civil engineering disasters of the past 100 years, as well as a summary of NASA's Artemis program to return humans to the surface of the moon. So I want to send a shout out to the channel members. I really appreciate your ongoing support, as well as the support of those of you who have provided super thanks.